Also, there's quite bad traffic out there, and you two haven't been at all before, so I'll just give you a bit of background and a bit of recapping to put you in the picture. And what this cycle of meetings is called is Philosophy of the Cosmic Dance, which is just a title we came up with that reflects the idea of the dance of creation and the dance of our identity. And the whole background to it is the teaching, universal teaching known as non-dualism. And non-dualism, you find it at the basis of all the world's great religions and philosophies. So it doesn't matter whether you've been brought up as a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Jain or a Hindu or a Christian, or you're Jewish or whatever, at the basis of your particular religion you'll find this philosophy underlying it all. And there's a lovely metaphor which I've used lots of times but you've never heard it, and it's as if there's this great ocean, a great underground ocean that underlies everything, and there are all these different wells that go down into the great ocean, and your particular well might be a Zen Buddhist well, or it might be a Hindu Advaita well, or it might be a Sufi well. And when you get down the well and you reach the great ocean, then you understand all the other wells. So whatever particular tradition you follow, once you realise your unity with the great ocean, then you understand the metaphors from all the other traditions. So if, for instance, you're a Sufi and that's your route to unity, then you understand all the Zen Buddhist metaphors or the Christian metaphors. So you don't have to change your own religion or your own particular lifestyle. It's just individually suited to each person. And non-dualism we went into last week, but I'll just give you a very brief resume. All it means, in India they use the word Advaita, which means not two. So what it's saying is that the universe and yourself and everything else is not two. So that implies that there's just one. So it's as if there's just one being or one consciousness which is looking out through all of our different eyes. So what looks out through my eyes is exactly the same as what looks out through your eyes and all the billions of beings. It's just the one consciousness. And again, there's another very simple metaphor we used last week which puts it really clearly, and it was used by an American writer and philosopher called Caine. And it's an answer to the fact is why is there a creation, and why do we all appear separate, and why, if we already are the one consciousness, why do we perceive ourselves as separate individuals? And he gives the analogy of you're playing a game of chess and you're the one consciousness, there's just one of you playing the game, and you're sitting on this side of the board and you make your move, and then you go around to the other side of the board, hello, and in order to play the game against yourself you have to forget who you were in the first place. So in order for the whole drama to happen, when you're playing the opposite role in the chess game, you forget that you're the one consciousness in order that the drama of life can take place. Then when you've made your move, then you can come back round. I'd wedge the door open probably to play the first role. So using that analogy, all of us are the one consciousness playing the great drama of creation, but in forgetfulness. And that's exactly how it's meant to be. It's not like, oh dear, we've forgotten, because without this illusion of separation, then there wouldn't be the great drama of creation. Hello, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
And in the great drama, it's as if we perceive ourselves all as separate entities reacting with other separate entities, and we're all playing these different roles within the drama. But if you go back to the analogy of the chess game, all of us are just the one mind or the one consciousness playing all these different roles within the drama. Now I've done a diagram here, and which sort of sums up more or less the process of life. And I wanted this meeting, the main theme, to be on the journey of life, which is also reflected for those of you who know the turning ceremony, or the macabre. It's the circle. Oh, come in. It's Phil, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Cheers. It's the circle. It's the turning circle. So, in the turning circle, it's divided into two halves. And first of all, you have the outflow from the one into many. So, the one mind. Again, another Ken Wilber analogy. He says it gets a bit boring just being the one mind. So, as it's no fun having dinner alone, it manifests itself as a creation. So the one becomes the multiplicity. In Taoism, they say the great Tao manifests as the 10,000 things. So that's the oneness manifests as the many. And that's symbolized by the first half of the turning circle. And then the second half is called the return to source, and it's the return of the many back into the oneness. So it's the gradual realization that you already are the one mind. So no one really disappears, goes out from the one mind. It's just the way it manifests. But at a certain point, the forgetfulness begins to be removed, and then you start to remember who you really are. So if you use a Christian analogy, it's just the same as the parable of the prodigal son, who leaves his father's house and goes off into the world, and eventually he's reduced to eating the pig food, I think. And then at a certain point he comes unto himself, and then this gradual return journey starts, which is the remembrance of what your true nature really is. And that's, again, an analogy for life. And another analogy from Rumi, which almost everyone has heard lots and lots of times, but I'm going to repeat it because it's so important, is Rumi's story of the man from Baghdad. And there was this man living in Baghdad, and he kept dreaming that there was this amazing treasure in a house in Cairo. And eventually he dreams it so often he decides to set off on an adventure to Cairo. And on the way he has lots of sort of trouble and tribulation. It's quite traumatic. And eventually he gets to Cairo, and when he gets there he meets a man on the street, and he tells the man from Cairo all about his dream. And the man from Cairo says, well, that's jolly strange, because I have this recurring dream that there's a great treasure hidden in a particular house in Baghdad. And he describes the house, and the man from Baghdad recognizes that it's his own house. So he goes back to Baghdad, digs in the basement, and there's the treasure. And what I think that's a metaphor for is, again, the process of life. How we already are the one mind. We already are what we're seeking for. We already are the one consciousness. But you have to leave it in a metaphorical way and forget that that's your true nature. And then you go off into life, and in a roundabout way you suddenly come back to realizing that what you're looking for you've had all the time. But again, like the story of the prodigal son and the circle of the Macabre, you have to say yes to the journey of life. You have to go out into life and have all these varied experiences until this return journey happens and the recognition of who you've always been. So that's really the sort of basic fundamental idea. It's the idea that you already are the oneness. The one consciousness, God, the great Tao, Allah, is already looking out through your eyes right now. It doesn't need uncovering because it's already looking out. It's already what you are, and it's already what everybody else is. But for the purpose of the drama, there's just been this forgetfulness. In order that the drama of life can happen, you've had to misidentify your sense of self with what is really just a vehicle of consciousness. So you've identified yourself with your mind and your body, so that's your psyche, and your physical body, and you've said I to that, rather than saying I to the thing which is looking out behind that. And it's not at all remote, it's so simple and immediate that it's very easy to overlook it and not see it. There's a great tendency to look for something which is obscure and distant and far away and mystical, but this is so near. Rumi, quoting from the Quran, says it's nearer, what we're after is nearer than your own jugular vein, which is a lovely metaphor. And to return to this model here, ideally I'd like to have this sort of drawn out as a circle, but it's another metaphorical way of explaining it. And anything we say in this meeting or anywhere else is just a concept or a metaphor. What this is, it can't be explained in words, because language is by its very nature dualistic. So all the different metaphors we use will just be pointers towards your own direct experience. So no one can explain it, you just notice it for yourself. But different metaphors will help different people at different times of life. So when you're first born, so the science of psychology says, and you're a baby, the baby doesn't differentiate itself from the world around it. There's no sense of a subject and an object. So it doesn't distinguish itself from its mother or its father or its siblings or all of its surroundings. Everything is experienced as a single unity, and that's the underlying unified state. And as you grow up a little bit, you're gradually taught that you're separate. You're taught that you have a name. In my case, the name is Philip, so I start to identify with Philip. And then I start to separate myself off from brothers and sisters. So then you have I and other, so it's yourself, and everything which is outside that boundary is perceived as other. So it's not a natural process, it's just something which is learnt. So this idea of separation is overlaid on top of the already existing unity. So it's like there's a superimposition on top of this basic unified state. And that, again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the drama. And without this idea of being a separate self or being a separate ego, you wouldn't be able to relate to other individuals in the world and earn your living and have families and live life. So it's part of the drama. It's just how it is. And so as you grow up, you develop hopefully a healthy sense of self, and you start to relate to other separate selves. And your basic identity in the unified state I would describe as just the I am identity. So it's just the pure sense of amness, which is unqualified, and it has no boundaries. When you start to identify your sense of self with the vehicle of consciousness, with the mind-body, then the pure sense of I am becomes I am something. So again, in my case, I am Philip or I am Wendy. The I amness has now been superimposed with I am something. And the good side of being an I am something, as mentioned, you are able to relate to all the other I am somethings in the world, and the drama of life continues. The downside of I am something is that you're then in a cycle of pleasure and pain. So when you perceive yourself as separate, then you find yourself dealing with other separate entities, and that gives rise to a cycle of when life is very good, then you're happy. When life is tough, then you're unhappy. So you get this continued cycle. And that goes on for so long, really, until it exhausts itself. At a certain point, you normally get a bit fed up with the cycle of pleasure-pain. And also, you've got this memory and longing for the unified state. And Rumi describes that right at the beginning of the Masnavi with his story about the reed flute and how it's a song of longing for the reed bed, how it longs for its origins. So all the time there's this sense that you've lost something and you're looking for something and you can't find it. And that longing you begin to project. First of all, you project it onto your life's goals. So you think, if I had a perfect partner, then I'd have this perfect contentment. And if I had a really good job and a big house and a big car, whatever your particular thing is, and when you get the thing eventually that you really want, for a little while there's no desire, so you feel happy. And then again the desire, the longing starts to arise again. The nice thing is that what you're looking for has never actually disappeared, because although your mind-body is changing, and all through life your I am something identity is changing, your basic sense of I am, the basic feeling of what is looking out, never changes. When you're 4 years old, there's the same thing looking out as when you're 60 years old. It's the same I am is looking out through your eyes. If you solely identify with the mind-body, then life is very traumatic, because as you go through life, your mind-body changes. Your body changes rapidly from 5 to 60. And all your psyche changes, your interests from when you were 5 are very different from when you're 50. So at that level there's constant change. And also if your identity, again, is in the I am something, you identify with the way you look, you identify with your job title, you identify with your family position. And all of these things are changing all the time. And often you've got a great job title and you see people become very sort of proud of their job titles. And then one day you're made redundant and suddenly you face this great crisis because you've lost your whole sense of identity and you wonder who you are. And again, there's something Eckhart Tolle brilliantly described, which he called the pain body. which is where your identity on that level, your temporal identity, becomes bound up with some traumatic event or events in your life. And then you identify yourself through this pain, so you identify yourself as a victim. And all of that is just part of the I am something. But as we've mentioned, in the background there's this memory of the unity, and Rumi uses the term the beloved for this unity, this sense of I am. And the great thing about your sense of I am is being universal. It's my I am is exactly the same as your I am. What's looking out through my eyes is exactly the same as what's looking out through your eyes. There's no difference at all. So all that's happened is that this superimposition has happened of you identifying with the vehicle rather than with the sense of consciousness. Now, when you start to notice that, you start to notice that you're not just the mind-body mechanism, but you're this awareness which is aware of it. Something happens. And the noticing of it is almost like a process where you disidentify of anything which can be seen or observed. So you say anything which I can observe is not I. So you can observe the world around you, so that's not I. And then you can observe your body, and so that's not I. And then if you think of the thinking and feeling processes, there's something which is aware that you're thinking or you're feeling. So clearly thought and feelings again are not ultimately who you are. So then it's like you go back in a causal chain, and at first it appears like when you try and look inwards, when you try and look at what's behind your eyes, because it can't actually be observed, because it is itself the observer, there are no boundaries to it. Anything you can observe has a beginning and an end in space and time. Any experience you have, whether it's blissful or unhappy, has a start and an end. You can observe that. Whereas that which does the observing, there are no boundaries. You can't observe it because it is itself the observer. And because it has no boundaries, it gives the appearance of feeling of being just a great emptiness or a great voidness. It's like you'd always thought there you were at the heart of your being, and when you look there, it's like there's nothing there. You can't find a separate entity. It's like there's just nothingness. And it's like the background to who you are is like the background of deep sleep. It's just like a total emptiness. And the Buddhists refer to this as voidness or sunyata. And I've called this stage I am nothing. I don't exist. I've also linked it into what I call beingness, or what's known as presence. It's just like your basic sense of amness, or your basic sense of awareness, but is all the time looking out. And in some philosophies, particularly at a certain point, the Buddhists used to stop at that point. They'd say reality is just voidness, it's complete emptiness, and there's nothing there. And that's really that's a stage in the process. So normally in this journey, at some point when you've got fed up with the pleasure-pain cycle, often you're drawn to particular techniques like meditation or turning or yoga or tai chi or whatever method suits you, or even if you have no method, the journey of life itself provides this process of looking inwards and discovering that who you really are is beyond the cycle of pleasure and pain. That who you really are is this great stillness which underlies all phenomena. And at that point it's as if you've swam down to the bottom of the ocean and you're looking up at the top of the waves from below, with the sun rippling on them, and it's like you're just observing without comment the surface of life, the surface of your life, just going on above you from the point of view of great stillness. So it's as if you are this stillness and you're just observing life going on as a drama. At that point there can still be a subtle subject-object duality, because there's still the sense of you as a great stillness looking out on an external manifestation. What happens next, or can happen simultaneously, is the realization that everything that you're observing is taking place within your consciousness, and that it's only an appearance that there is an external outside world, and that's not a remote elevated state, it's what's already happening at the moment. Everything you experience, like when you lie on the grass at night and look up at the Milky Way stretching across the horizon, all of that immensity is experienced already within your awareness. Already it's happening within your conscious presence. It's only an appearance, but again, someone's told you that it's happening out there and you're in here. Already your experience is that it's happening within you. Do come in? That's all right. So any sound or visual image, however near or far away from you it is experienced in exactly the same place that you experience your thoughts and feelings. But you've been told it's somewhere far away and external, but the actual experience takes place within consciousness and within presence. So already there is the I am everything, it's the I am everything experience. And in this case, the I am everything happens in an empathic way. When you're the baby in the pre-rational state of unity, there's no empathy with everything around you. When you've done the journey, you've done the journey of life, you've done the journey of the prodigal son or the man from Baghdad, then the unity is rediscovered or re-acknowledged, but in a fully empathetic way. So the baby doesn't mind if it wakes you up in the middle of the night by crying, but in the rediscovered state of unity, you realise that everything else, every other person, there aren't any other people, it's all just a complete oneness. So you treat everything else with the same respect and the same way that you would treat yourself, because it is yourself. So that's enough of me for a little bit. Any observations or questions or things you disagree with?
So Philip, what you're saying is that actually what I've been searching for is myself.
Yes, but the searching is all a part of it. It's given rise to this drama of life. But the great thing is that you go off in life and you have all these traumas and battles, but underneath it, it's all okay, and it's not actually anything down to you as a separate entity. So at one level, you're just witnessing this drama unfold. It's like when an actor acts in a play. Normally when an actor acts in a play, part of them remembers that they're an actor just acting in the drama. If you forget you're the actor, then you become totally immersed in the drama and you suffer as the play goes. When you remember you're the actor, then you cease to suffer, but you just observe what arises within the drama. And that observing includes not only what goes on externally, but also what happens within your psychology and your feelings and your actions and your reactions. You're just watching it all happen.
So if I'm disagreeing with somebody or have this conflict perhaps, then am I having a conflict with myself?
You are really. It's a very good thing to remember when you are in conflict with someone. And remember that the one mind is playing every role in the drama. So the person you're fighting in conflict with is also the one mind, and the one mind's having this sort of game with itself. There's a very good story that the Shankracharya told about one of the Indian gods who was fighting with another character, and during the fight the person who was fighting dropped his sword, and he was very worried, and the Indian god said, don't worry, just pick up your sword again, this is all just a drama that we've got to fight each other, just pick up your sword and carry on. There's another lovely story from the Shankracharya which I keep remembering. It's about how a man from the country went up to the city to stay with some friends, and because he hadn't been to the city before, they decided to take him to the cinema as a treat. And the film came on, and one scene included this big lion charging at the audience. And the man from the country was so frightened he jumped up and hit the screen with his stick, and the whole cinema was thrown into chaos. And the Shankara used that as an illustration for what happens when we take the drama as real. We jump up and hit the screen with a stick. But within the drama, as apparent separate entities, we do come in. Nice to see you, Aziz. We're all playing different roles within this great drama, and with this knowledge that it is a drama and that you are the great stillness that underlies it, you play your particular role with much greater freedom. There's a looseness, and the reason being, because you know it's a drama, you know that it's all going to unfold in the way that it should, and with that knowledge you start to relax in your seat. It's like you're at a cinema and it's alright, it's a drama, you relax a bit. You don't jump up and start hitting the screen with your stick quite so much.
But it's also very 3D and it's so real because everything is coming out of you. It's live.
Yeah. There are lots of lions leaping out.
Aishan, you know what you were talking about last week? No, this week actually. About your soul is just here to experience. And that we're coming from, or that we are one, but that we're coming from the I am everything. And so in that duality, actually that what you were talking about when you were saying when you were describing I am something, and you were saying that we have to experience pleasure and pain, and that actually really, I mean, I hear you say that often, but it actually really, it kind of really, I really understood that 2 days ago. It's like, wow. And it also related to what you were saying about our souls are just here to experience. And I was like, yeah, of course, you have to experience love and hate. You have to experience both. Yeah.
There's a brilliant bit, again in the Mathnavi, where someone asks, why does God create villains and good people? And Rumi says he wouldn't be the king if he, or a brilliant artist wouldn't be brilliant if he couldn't portray both good people and villains. The fact that he can portray villains so brilliantly is a mark of his skill. I think I've got the actual bit here from the Mathnavi where he says
Actually, total amnesia is also a mark of his skill.
everything's a mark of his skill.
But some people never come out of that amnesia, right? They don't come to I am nothing, or indeed I am everything. Or does everyone experience all those stages?
I think it varies just on a temporal level in time. Some people very early on get a sense that you're not just this temporal identity, and then this return to the source, this recognition starts to happen. Often, if you're a child and one of your school friends dies or your parent dies, then it seems to start very early on. Other people, obviously it seems to go on much longer through life, this taking the drama as the only reality. And then often in the dying process, you see, if you're with people who are dying, there's often a quite rapid shedding of the superimposition. It's as if one by one the layers suddenly fall away. I remember when Dr. Rolls' wife, Mrs. Rolls, was dying, and Dr. Rolls described to me how her dying process was happening, and he said it was like layer after layer just fell away until all that was left was a being of light. And at a certain point Dr. Rolls tried to call her back, and she woke up and said, "Why did you call me back? It was so beautiful where I was." So
is that like what Rumi talks about with veil?
yeah, it's like you've had this you've learnt that you're separate, so all these layers you've put on like coats. And for some people at a certain point in life you start taking the coats off again. Life provides the process and it all starts falling away. With other people it happens quite near to the end of life. The coats suddenly fall off. That's why the Sufis have the saying, "Die before you die, then you will not taste death." So you're dying to the temporal soul identity with your mind body and becoming aware of your I am, or your unified identity. If you get in the habit of doing that, then when death comes you already are the one mind which knows no death. So it's die before you die, then you will not taste death. I'll just read the Rumi bit. And if you say that evils too are from him, that is true, but how is it a defect in his grace? His bestowing this evil is even his perfection. I will tell you a parable in illustration, O respected one. A painter made two kinds of pictures, beautiful pictures and pictures devoid of beauty. He painted Joseph and fair-formed houris, and painted ugly afrits and devils. Both kinds of pictures are evidence of his mastery. Those ugly ones are not evidence of his ugliness, they are evidence of his bounty. He makes the ugly of extreme ugliness. It is invested with all possible ugliness, in order that the perfection of his skill may be displayed, and that the denier of his mastery may be put to shame. And if he cannot make the ugly, he is deficient in skill. Hence he, God, is the creator of both the infidel and the sincere faithful. From this point of view, then, both infidelity and faith are bearing witness to him, both are bowing down in worship before his lordliness. Rumi does have such a lovely way of putting it.
Phrase I really like in relation to that is in the Upanishads. There's a little passage where it says that form of his, with a capital H, is for the sake of making him known. So whether it's apparently good or bad, whether it's sunny or cloudy, or whether it's a villain or a hero, when one sees things as they are, it's still the beloved, and it's just a different cloak.
Very nice.
And so you're always with yourself, and you're not taken away from yourself by the emotional charge of liking or disliking or whatever. And when it's like that, it is really rather blissful.
The main sort of practical implication of all this in your life, and what it implies, is in Advaita they have a term which is you are not the doer, which means that all of life, everything that happens, is all like a play or a dance, or all the manifestation of the one mind, and you as a separate entity aren't the doer. It's all, the real doer is the one consciousness out of which the whole drama emanates. Normally in meetings I'm quite sort of guarded when I say that, because some separate selves don't like to be told that they're not the doers, and it leads to explosions. But when you notice it, a good way to notice it is just to observe, look back at the process of your own life, and if you look back at your life from a vantage point, you'll see it's almost as if it's a well-composed play which is going on in spite of you, not because of you. And there was a lovely interview with actor Michael Caine on the BBC 4 Radio 4 programme Front Row during the week, and someone had asked Michael Caine if he believed in God, and he said of course he did. And then he told this story about his life and about how he met his wife and all these different coincidences which had happened to him, and how jobs had appeared at just the right time, as the way all sort of people had just appeared, and he came to the conclusion that someone up there seemed to like him. But it was because of that observation of the process and the way things unfolded, and even the things which at the time appeared to be ill fortune, when looked at from this greater perspective, turned out to be integral parts of the unfolding of the drama. And when you observe this enough in your own life, it gives you a very firm conviction that it's nothing to do with you as a separate entity, but it's all, what you're witnessing is part of a great unfolding.
I think the wonderful spin-off of this, of truly seeing that you're not the doer, and that the character is seen through, and that what is happening is just blissful creation, just carrying on in front of you. And if you see that you're not the doer, you're actually able to lay down all the problems and all the burdens, and they can just be put aside because you're not the doer. And it just seems so simple to talk about it, but it just, for me, it was going to India and sitting with Ramesh Balsekar, who's very hot on non-personal doership. And the penny started to drop then that one isn't a doer, but as Philip says, if you're not very careful, you get into this minefield, and people still think, I'm a doer, I can do this. But actually, I truly see now that there is no choice and there's no free will. It's all just unfolding in perfect harmony in front of one at every minute. Something like that, but it seems to be the clue is actually seeing that the me doesn't do anything. It's the me, it's the character. It doesn't actually do anything, it's a character in the drama, in the play.
The trouble is that we often identify with the character. I was amazed to see the French mimic Marcel Marceau putting a mask on of a certain character, and then decides no, he doesn't like this. He puts another mask, and he keeps changing, and then he puts on a mask. Circumstances in his life change, and he tries to get it out, and he couldn't. You see his contorted face, and he brings a chisel and the hammer and tries to break it, and it won't. And that I find sometimes we so identify with whatever we're going through that we're blinded to anything else.
It's a subtle business, this, isn't it? Because the danger of the Ramesh approach is you can misunderstood. It develops into a kind of nihilism. Because there's still a part to be played at any moment, isn't there?
Absolutely.
It seems the art of life is that kind of surrender at any moment to just allow whatever is needed at that moment to manifest. But I mean, one of the questions I had for many, many years, it came up with there was a mystic, I think it was a 17th century mystic, and he said, his kind of way of approaching this was, he said that God is a pure no thing, concealed, going back to your nothing, concealed in the here and now. The less you reach for him, the more he will appear. So that kind of philosophy is surrender, just let it happen. And the more you allow things to unfold, the more this beloved, if you like, will become obvious. So that's one approach. But then you go to another, for instance, the Shankracharya talks about the need, or the analogy of the student and the master, and the master plunging the student's head under the water until he thinks he's going to die, and then allowing him up again, and saying that you need to have your desire for life at that moment needs to be replicated in terms of your desire for your self-realization. So in theory, in terms of the mind, there's a kind of conflict there, because do you just give up and surrender, or do you give your all, whatever that means? You see what I mean? So I'm sure there isn't a conflict, but to the mind there could appear to be a conflict. And I've often seen, what you were talking about turn into a kind of nihilism, which I think is not quite right.
I think most teachers, worth their salt, teach from both relative and absolute perspectives. So often when you're first dealing with a student, you talk from the point of view of the apparent separate self that they perceive themselves of, and you give them knowledge that applies to that, so that that's relative knowledge. And I think the Buddha called it ways and means for the purpose of those lost in delusion. It's just relative knowledge, and within that category belongs things like the law of karma. So from that perspective, you talk about making great efforts and other things, and you give them knowledge which is suited to that condition. Later on, when they have their own insights, then the teacher starts to give absolute knowledge, which is the knowledge from the point of view of the total unity and there being no separate self. So when you look at a great teacher's writings or teaching, it can appear, if you just read it, it can appear to contradict itself. But I think that's because of the two approaches of absolute and relative. And any great teacher will always teach from both points of view according to the experience of the disciple. We've nearly almost run out of time again, and 2 weeks' time we'll carry on with this dialogue. Because this is just quite a short course of altogether it's 6 meetings, I'm going through it quite quickly. Next term I'll be doing it on Thursday evenings, most weeks much slower, so this I'm doing quite quickly. But just to end with, here's another little Rumi bit, which again is, Rumi's again he's quoting from the Quran, and it's all to do with this concept of not being the doer. And he says, "Thou didst not throw when thou threwest. Whatsoever the soul sowest is from the soul of the soul. Thou didst not throw when thou threwest. Whatsoever the soul sowest is from the soul of the soul." We'll go into that more next week. Now, in a little while, there's a turning practice upstairs. 2 weeks' time. Turning practice.